Afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ariana, the housing clerk. I just want to let you know that you have enough members to begin the meeting if you would like to start.
Okay. Um, I think we are. I think Sean was not able to make it today. So, oh, there's Sean. Then we're good. Then let's get going. I'm going to, for my own sanity's sake, cut and paste the at least try to cut the paste the agenda into the chat. Oh, no chat. Okay. I'll keep it to the side. All right. So yeah, let's call this meeting to order. My name's Jeff Gentis. I am lucky enough to be co-chair of this task force. It is the task force to study the regulation of corporate housing acquisitions. And today is our first meeting, and I'm joined by our co-chair, Sarah White. Um, we are um, the first agenda items for us to make some remarks. That'll be fun. What I'm looking to do, at least personally, is try to have a couple meetings here. We are backed up against a December 31st deadline for submitting a report to the Housing Committee, which is tight and probably difficult to achieve with any real depth. One of the things that that may be possible is to discuss with the co-chairs of the Housing Committee, pushing that report off until sometime in January, given that it's a short session ahead coming up. So, at least as a heads up, that's one thing we're looking to do. Um, we're also looking to have maybe one or two more meetings in December scheduled around people's collective availability, and with one of those meetings perhaps being an informational session where we can hear from experts outside of this task force on what might be feasible. And ultimately, I see the deliverable as um, either ideas for legislation, perhaps even draft legislation for the committee to consider as one of its committee bills for the short session. Um, but I'm sure everyone comes with some different background in legislative work and in task force membership, and we're hoping that we can make some substantive contribution to housing legislation for 2026. Um, I guess that would be the remarks. So Sarah, do you have any remarks you'd like to say before we get into intros?
Well, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Sarah White. I'm an attorney at the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, and I agree with Jeff in terms of the vision. I hope that we can, compile our collective experiences and research and knowledge to understand in the time we have the extent of the problem with corporate ownership of a variety of kinds of housing, multifamily homes, single family, as well as mobile home parks, and seeing what maybe other states are doing as well to have some creative ideas for legislation here, in addition to the things we've already sort of been thinking about in Connecticut. And Jeff and I talked, and we're going to take turns co-chairing the meeting. So Jeff is going to chair this one, and then I'll chair the next one.
But Sarah will still be co-chairing as possible if to overrule me mid-meeting if need be.
Right.
Uh, so my yeah, we could go around and do introductions, and I'll just call on people based on where they are. I'm also a lawyer. I have been working in housing law since 2008, Staten Island Legal Services and Connecticut Fair Housing Center in particular, and I am a clinician at Yale Law School teaching something called appropriately enough, the housing clinic. So that's how, and I have a my time in Connecticut goes back pretty far in terms of legislative work, particularly with Connecticut Fair Housing Center to 2010, but even really into the 90s. And I did want to mention, I should have mentioned up top, I just would appreciate a word or a moment of silence for Representative Kevin Ryan, who passed away recently. Somebody at least I've known since 1994, maybe earlier. I can't quite remember. Um, and has been a real asset to the House. Okay, thank you. Um, I'm going to move in counterclockwise order, and I would love like everyone to say who they are. CTN is exempted, but Dave, why don't you go first?
Okay, my name is Dave Delory. I'm president of Connecticut Manufacturers Homeowners Alliance. We're recognized in state statute as an advocate for the rights of manufactured home park residents in our state. I've been involved for about, I don't know, 6 or 8 years since the park that I live in Southington was purchased by an out-of-state corporation, Sun Communities, and with the resulting cuts in services and increases in land rents. And I got involved with the DCP Advisory Council on manufactured housing, and we were successful a couple of years back in getting a right of first refusal that had been uh, passed in other states in New England. We got that through in 22 or 23, I guess, and we've tried to, try some other measures, and we're looking to. I'm looking forward to this. To learn more about what might be done to stop additional corporate intrusion into the manufactured home park world, because they're now at about 35 to 40% of the sites are owned by out-of-state corporate entities as of this point.
All right, thanks. Representative Menapace.
Hey, I'm Representative Nick Menapace. I am a rookie legislator. This is my first year. And I actually don't serve on housing or planning, but I do happen to be on my municipal planning commission. And we had a situation related to this, not quite exactly what Dave was saying, but with a large apartment building that was acquired by a corporate entity. And I think that the reason I proposed like this legislation to kind of happen was because the town really wasn't sure what tools that they had available to be able to do anything about that. And just like we were saying with manufactured homes, and we were talking about like this is something that I'm really hoping that we can come together and be able to try and assist municipalities in what their options are. I mean, this seems to be something that we discussed the special session the other week, that very bipartisan in an attempt to try and do something about this issue, that there is this concern about who is coming in and buying up large numbers of variety of different homes. And I'm hoping that this working group can help provide some of those answers for people. So thank you.
Cool. Would you mind telling everyone what the what district
Sorry.
you're the 37th covers?
Yeah, if you can't see it there, I am also happen to be the representative 37th district. And if you see in the bottom corner here, that is East Lyme, Salem, and Montville. So like Kevin Ryan was one of my co-representatives for Montville.
Got it. Thank you. Um, Ms. Gold.
Hi, I'm Lisa Gold. I'm from East Hartford. Born and raised. I moved out of state for a while for some jobs, but came back about 12 years ago now. I live with my mom because I cannot afford to even working full time. I have a full-time job. I've gotten several raises. I left the previous industry I was working for. Couldn't buy a house if I wanted to. Couldn't rent if I wanted to. Not making a livable wage, but working a professional full-time job. I was approached by Jason Rojas's office to serve on this task force, I guess just to bring a resident perspective for affordable housing. Um, I'm involved in, town committees and boards and commissions and things like that in town. So kind of, still getting involved in, you know, giving back to the community and all that, and like legislative. I'm not so familiar with writing policy, but definitely interested in learning how this process works and was excited to bring a different perspective to this team, I guess. So something needs to be done because affordability is not there. So
Cool. Welcome.
thanks.
Sean, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Gio. I'm a policy director at an organization called Partnership for Strong Communities. We're a statewide advocacy and research and policy organization based in Hartford. We've been around since 1998, working on affordable housing and homelessness policy. I don't actually know a lot about corporate ownership. It's something I think that hasn't risen to the top of the policy conversation, much. I think Dave was mentioning manufactured homes, right of first refusal, and I know Rafi Podolsky has really been a champion of and hopefully continue to be helpful for you. But other than that, I think it hasn't risen to the top of the conversation up at the Capitol. So I'm really happy to be part of the conversation, hopefully helpful as we move forward.
Right. Mr. Lovejoy.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Lovejoy. I'm a project manager with the Connecticut Department of Housing. I was asked by the commissioner to serve on this committee. I am a regional planner by trade, and I oversee a program at the agency called the Municipal Affordable Housing Technical Assistance Initiative. A lot of letters, a lot of words. What I ultimately do is I work closely with communities to establish and to identify local planning projects that can help communities move the needle on getting more affordable housing units developed. But the truth is, a lot of what I usually like to describe what I'm doing is if people are moving into a house or an apartment is step 20. The work that I do with the communities is like steps 1 through 5. So a lot of it has to do with site suitability, site, feasibility, identifying primary areas. I'm also going to be working in conjunction with OPM as they roll out the new changes to the housing bill. Impacts a lot of our long-term planning documents. So a lot of times when I'm working with communities, it's about getting more housing into them, looking at more of these things and not necessarily, I think, on the problem that we'll be addressing, which is what happens when you do have these large, corporate purchasing, and what is a community and what sort of powers do a municipality have, as the representative sort of mentioned, what can they do to either prevent this or maybe establish things early on to kind of deter these issues that come up from occurring. So I'm excited to be part of this team. I have a lot of experience tracking, monitoring, assisting with policy. I've formerly served as a clerk of the Energy and Technology Committee at the Legislative Office Building. And so I am familiar with the process and excited to be part of this team and my first official task force as a employee here. So thank you and hand it back to you.
Cool. Will, I don't know if you'd like to say anything.
I'm House
How
member
are
of
ya?
policy. I'm not on the committee, but I'm just here to observe.
That works. Thanks. Our real boss is Ariana, who put this meeting together. Um, I don't know if Ariana, if you would like to say hello at all.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm off camera. I'm home and my computer is not cooperating. But I am Ariana Sakidis. I'm the Housing Committee Clerk, and I'll be in the background helping to produce the eventual report and organize our meetings whenever they come up.
Cool.
Jeff,
All
can
right.
you say a little more too about myself?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So like I mentioned, I'm an attorney at the Connecticut for Housing Center. I've been there for 13 years and worked on housing issues primarily at a legal aid organization before that. And in addition to sort of the issues people mentioned with corporate ownership, I'm particularly concerned about the effect of corporate ownership on the conditions that tenants are living under, and not doing maintenance, an increase in fires around our state, that's affecting people's like health and safety. And for the past 5 years, I've worked quite a lot with groups of tenants who have corporate owners in different places across the state who are dealing with issues of rent increases, no fault evictions, as well as conditions, and have done a lot of work too around research of corporate entities. So trying to connect what properties landlords own, since the corporate structure often makes it hard to connect them, and trying to figure out their business model and things like that. So I look forward to bringing that to the working group as well. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks. No, and I think we'll be able to, I imagine for a lot of us, we'll also be able to tap colleague experience and things like affordable housing development in working in various roles, sometimes adversarial with sometimes as clients with housing authorities, and hopefully be able to tap that experience as we go. So for the next agenda item is new items. One thing I wanted to just cover at the forefront, and this is more of a question for Ariana, is there something that exists that's sort of like FOIA for citizen volunteer commissioners or anything along those lines that, just general, I don't know, task force orientation that would be worth circulating for everybody?
I can take a look what the library has on the fifth floor and see. There might be something that we can use as an outline, but
Cool.
if you're looking for like a scope for today's meeting, I can also answer that a little bit as well too.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think there's just I am typically on the outside looking in, but I'm aware for things like how many days in advance we need to notice a meeting. It's usually we have to get it, out there at least 5 days in advance. To the extent there are written materials that we are creating that connect to this task force, pretty sure they'd be covered under FOIA, which means that someone could, who has an interest in this policy, could, request from, each one of us to produce those kinds of written materials. All those things are, things to keep in mind. And I just don't know if at some point there's been something that says, hey, here's what you folks need to do. Okay. So I guess in terms of the other new items, and I alluded to it earlier, but having a sense of if people have ideas, and I'm not expecting, given this being the first meeting, putting you on the spot now, but between now and the next week or so, if you have ideas about who you'd like to hear from, Dave, you'd mentioned something in the legislation in Maine targeting corporate ownership of that might be pertinent. That might be one thing, and I'm thinking of trying to, aim for an informational session that's not too deep into December, but deep enough so that we have enough time to both think about and then reach out to potential speakers. So, Dave, if you want to say more, and then then Ben, you should
I've
go.
been in contact at a very 10,000 foot level with a couple of people in Maine on the legislation that passed concerning manufactured homes. And I did send everybody just about a half an hour before the meeting an article that summarizes. I sent an email that summarizes what they've done up there regarding manufactured homes. They had to make some changes because the park owners were going around a new statute, and quite frankly, it's the same thing. We think that's the same thing going on here. But I just thought that maybe we could take a look at what they've done in Maine regarding manufactured homes and think about it with owners cooperatives, because I know there are some of those in Connecticut, and perhaps apply them as a tool, as one tool to keep like I know that there's one place in Beacon Falls was I don't know, 100-unit apartment building that was converted from an old mill. It was just sold last year to a New York investor, and jacked the rents up like $300 a month, and people are just like frantic. They're trying to, it's not a high rent district there, and that's the kind of thing it seems to me like you want to try to stop. I know it goes on in Waterbury and some of the other big cities as well, for apartment buildings. And I just thought if we could take a look at that, maybe we could transfer it over to, to apply to more than just manufactured home parks.
Great. Ben?
Yeah, I guess it's Dave, thanks for sending that over. I'm of the school of thought that no one has a monopoly on good ideas. So if another state has done something well, let's learn from them. So if you have other stuff to share, something that I'm more curious to kind of bring up is how we can come up with policy solutions that target these corporate entities while not having an equal application of the law. Ways in which we'd be able to sort of target while also not essentially targeting, which I think is always creative policymaking. But I'll hope that there'll be some sort of guidance with two attorneys chairing this group. I'm sure that'll help. But as we seek solutions within such a tight time frame, I think it'll be kind of helpful if we do come up with things for you all to quickly let us know if those are just, would be legal in application. So any articles or things to that extent, if the clerk can pass those around if they have them, just to kind of get up to speed on some of this stuff. Again, this is not an area of expertise for me, but again, one that I only have some personal experience with living in having a pretty awful rental situation at one point in my life with a large corporate entity that does a lot of operation across the tri-state area. So I know about that, but I don't know what you can do, to limit the free market at. So again, any information that you can provide on that side of things would be very helpful for me personally.
Cool. I imagine that, speaking for myself, that I don't intend on acting. This is the most lawyer thing I'm going to say, hopefully, during the entire life of this task force. I'm not going to be counsel to the task force, but I don't want to come up with ideas that seem like flawed. And to the extent that like some of these issues, whether they're raised, to the extent that we propose legislation that could have issues, screen for what we can, and then let LCO and some of the internal staff work through some of those issues. And I have found that I have found a rather conservative approach, like lowercase c, cautious approach to coming up with laws that could have raised, the constitutional hackles, at least so far. So I'm not too concerned that we would get over our skis once the legislative session kicks in. But yeah, noted. To the extent that somebody has interest in the single family home market, a lot of my work is in the sort of is in foreclosure prevention, and also in the working with tenants who are renting all sorts of different sizes of homes. We haven't seen the sorts of issues, at least in my shop, of that other states have experienced, where private equity and the like are purchasing large swaths of single family homes at foreclosure auctions and then sort of controlling a portion of the rental market that way, that you might see in, say, like Atlanta or Arizona, Nevada, California. But if that's an issue that folks want to pursue, let us know. Or if you're seeing something different in your own experience with the people that you work with, or your friends and family, let us know. I don't know. I think this task force is broadly worded enough that it wasn't necessarily the sole thing that it wasn't the focus of it by any means, but it's something that exists. The other thing that I think falls under this, to be clear, is not just and we've had some reference to it, but like decent sized landlords, sort of irrespective of their corporate form, I don't think we care about whether or not they're actually incorporated as corporations or are LLCs, or if there's common ownership putting together, sizable amounts of equity to purchase multiple properties and multiple units. That for us, I think, is within our scope as a task force. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, just a couple more issues I wanted to flag for us both to read more about and maybe to hear from. I mean, one is the relationship between corporate landlords and really exploitative fee structures. There was the Invitation Homes case brought by the FTC that resulted in a large settlement against a huge corporate landlord that was adding all of these additional fees into the contract that weren't disclosed, that were sometimes presented as optional, but essentially mandatory, that made the rent so much higher. And that's something I see a lot in my practice increasingly with corporate landlords of all size. They're increasing the rent, but they're also adding in convenience fees, like, different kinds of parking fees, more and more and more. So it makes rent even more expensive. So I think we could probably hear someone talk about that or do some research as well. And then just another resource I've been thinking about is the Private Equity Stakeholder Project, which is like a national research organization that does a lot of research on private equity, obviously has done a report on private equity ownership of housing. It's more focused on single family housing. However, some of the solutions they look at or legislation that states have passed or considering would be applicable to like different kinds of housing as well, which includes some like limits on the number of like units a corporate entity can own, like reforms tied into landlord licensing schemes. So preventing someone from getting a license if there's a whole bunch of problems with their other properties, which could be a way for us to think about addressing corporate ownership here as well.
Cool. Okay. Anyone else for now?
I had a couple responses. So as far as, the issue, you used the phrase getting out over our skis. I completely understand and on that. I do want to say that in the law in Maine with that they're trying to um, uh, lessen the possibility of corporate investment from in manufactured home parks. They're trying to incentivize it rather than limit the actual, which would probably not limit the rights of somebody to buy into the park.
Mm.
That would probably face a absolute constitutional challenge. But they're trying to incentivize it by doing away with the transfer tax for a sale from a park owner to a residence group, and let's see, by um, I'm sorry, I can't remember the other. They're trying to incentivize rather than prohibit. I think you probably look at it from that perspective. Also, if you're going to be able to um, uh, incentivize and come and get to the point where you can actually have residence groups by manufactured housing parks or apartment complexes, you're going to need funding, which is, always a huge part of the equation. And I don't know, just wanted to ask Mr. Lovesley at the Department of Housing, is there any sources of funding within your operation that could, if we can get to that point where the DOH could step in and help with like down payments or infrastructure improvements? Are you aware of any programs like that?
So I'm not in the what we call the development side of the shop, which handles essentially the checkbook that's allocated to us by by the legislature and the budget. But what I will say is that we do have single family first time home buyers down payment assistance programs that's in place right now. We also have the time to own program, which helps with additional down payment assistance. Furthermore, we don't We don't do it often, but there are times in the past when the agency has worked with nonprofit organizations on the acquisition of property. Um, we have what's called the developers engagements process. So if someone has a concept, like twice a year, we invite proposals from nonprofit, for-profit entities to look at, that tell us about wanting to develop housing, preserve housing, et cetera, to give them opportunity to kind of come to the agency, and we try to find resources for them if it's appropriate. It's more of like a routing mechanism that helps out. So there certainly is opportunity. We're always looking for good ideas. I will mention that during this last legislative session, the special session, there was a component of that bill that created a newly established housing growth fund, I believe it's called, which is authorized to help with infrastructure investments, things that extend that thankfully that language is written in a way that allows for a lot of different projects to sort of go through there as long as everyone's got their housing plans in order and such. But if ideas come up, additionally, last legislative session, the Department of Housing had a proposal on the table that did not advance beyond the committee stage in the Housing Committee, which was that any acquisition of properties, I think it was greater than 10 units. I can't remember exactly what it was, but essentially anyone who came in and purchased a property, they were restricted on raising the rent beyond a certain percentage within the first year without justification. I'm like grossly simplifying that bill, but in theory, that would be something that we had considered, and was, like I said, that legislation has a text language. It was out there. It didn't go through any further. But that was something that was considered additionally. Where my head's at is sort of initially is we also just passed in the housing bill to lower the threshold for who has to have a fair rent commission. These commissions can play incredibly powerful roles within communities to help preserve from gross rent hikes, and it gives an opportunity for landlord tenant conflict resolution. Lowering that threshold to 15,000 obviously means many more municipalities are now included. So we could look at strengthening, there's the trainings and things to that extent so that people can help recognize these sorts of things. But again, it's back to your original question, Dave, like there is resources available. It just really depends on what the project is moving forward. And I know that mobile manufacturing parks are kind of coming up more and more in conversation as we look to come up with creative solutions for affordable housing options in and across the state of Connecticut. So long answer to a question, but there is stuff out there. I think we do have foundation though for moving forward on certain things.
So if we wanted to, would they address a concept? Because right now, we don't have a park in the pipeline. But that would the Department of Housing, you think, would address the concept just to get an idea whether they would be receptive to it?
Yeah, I mean, if you had an individual project, Dave, feel free to reach out to me like directly at, maybe outside of this meeting, and I'd certainly be able to sit down and flesh things out, or at least put you in the right contact with people if you have a specific problem. As part of my job managing this program that I oversee, I also function as sort of eyes and ears and a liaison between the agency and the municipalities. So I, often put myself out there to help people out and sort of navigating some of these things. So feel free to reach out directly to me if, like I say, you have a concept or whatever. If I can't answer the question individually, I can certainly put you in contact with someone at the agency who may be able to provide you better information.
I just assumed that Ben was the person who has the checkbook for all the sewers that are going to be needed for that steps 1 through 5 that he mentioned earlier.
Yeah. I think I'd probably be getting a little bit bigger paycheck, but I'm certainly in there to help out where I can.
All right. Representative Menapace.
Thank you. On that note, I really did want to say, because I believe that the housing bill even goes even further on that and also creates regional fair rent commissions. I can tell you, and that the creation of our East Lyme, which is where I live, they created a fair rent commission pretty much in direct response to one of these corporate acquisitions, because there was a feeling of not really being able to do anything in response. And frankly, I know that won't really fall under ours, but I felt like the town was kind of blindsided. They didn't know they could create a fair rent commission unless they met, they had, were some of them were mistakenly they had to meet like the certain population. It's like, no, any town can make one of these. And I think that helping out those municipalities and making sure that they're having those because this was something that like unfortunately the Southeast Connecticut Council of Governments really didn't have much advice for the town either. They kind of had to do it a lot on their own. And that's something that is a tool in the toolbox to be able to help those. And I believe it was Dave who said as well. I believe a similar legislation was considered in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Forgive me, I don't remember exactly if both of those were passed. So I do definitely want to hear from some of our neighboring states, not about fair rent commissions, that's unique to Connecticut, but about these acquisitions of the different types of housing as sent to us. That the Maine just had theirs with manufactured homes. But I mean, this is something that I believe, Jeff, you had mentioned is kind of happened a lot for the single family homes as well. But I think there's a lot of, I know we have a relatively limited time that we can use on this one, but I think there is a lot of resources out there. And I hope everyone else would be, I would be very interested in hearing from some of these other, maybe other legislators, other state agencies and other places, if they were available, to tell us what has worked and what has not in those other states. Thank you.
Cool. All right, great. I'm just trying to take my own notes here. Yeah, and it's some of it. There's a couple of things happening. I think just to that point you made. You have our COGS, which are motivated, at least at their inception was motivated by like Federal Department of Transportation funding, and then we're doing the land use planning that sort of gets part of transportation planning. We've kind of backed our way into these regional ways to do housing solutions. So, I mean, it is what it is at this point. And then you also have, I think, something that Sarah can speak more to. But many of the municipalities, to the extent that they have council, the dearth of tenant side council has created perhaps has slowed the formation of fair rent commissions, because fundamentally what they will do is, while they provide a community good, they're reducing rent charges or not, right? They're not increasing rent charges for landlords. So I think we've seen some there. I wonder sometimes with some of these towns if they're getting the advice that all the advice that they could about the feasibility of doing fair rent commissions. All right, so we will also, everybody has our if there's anything else, please speak up. And I am in no way motivated to bring this to a close based on my need to pick up my daughter in about 8 minutes. But you have everybody's got everybody's emails now, and always happy to chat and then trying to come up with some ideas, whether it's and we'll see if it's feasible to get the informational session that I'm thinking of. Those are usually we're talking like hour and a half type affairs. Oh yes, Ariana.
Hi, I just wanted to interject really quick.
Yeah, please.
There were some cases and other reports referenced. I caught some of the ones that Sarah had mentioned. If there was anything that you as an individual brought up during the course of the meeting, if you would like to send that over to me, and then I can pass that out to the group, to everybody. And if there's anything additional that you would like circulated, if you'd like to ever send that to me directly, that's something that I can help.
Awesome. So I guess between I guess in the next let's say by like Wednesday or so of next week, so we're talking about the 3rd, if you could send either just to Sarah and me or around your general availability for say the week of the 15th for a meeting. I don't want to go deeper than that. And any particular topics you'd like to have covered at an informational meeting. And if you are willing by virtue of your personal professional contacts or just your ability to use Google and pick up the phone and call people who are happy to chat with us for 10, 15 minutes at that meeting about a particular topic, love to hear that too. And yeah, we'll send our phone numbers around too. So if you want to, if there's something you need to discuss with us in the meantime, feel free. But other than that, that is the announcement. That was agenda item 5, in case you didn't realize it. It segued to announcement of time and date, which essentially tabled. And with that, let's do Robert's Rules of Order for once. Anybody have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Oh, I'll second that.
Great. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
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 Great. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Great to see you. Thanks for being on this task force.
Have a
Let's
good
get
one.
something done.
Good job. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.